This is ready to go online. Any questions?
Yeah, I got one. How about the best network imaginable? Let's invent that.
We don't have time for lag or buffering.
Who doesn't want internet that helps AI do your homework even faster?
Come again?
Sorry, what was that?
The next generation 10G network only from Xfinity.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central. Today, we're coming to you fresh off the second practice at Eagles training camp. My name is EJ Smith. I'm the Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm joined by my fellow beat reporter, Jeff McLane, fresh off of a properly balmy practice, I would call it. Definitely pretty hot out there today. I'm just, want to welcome you to the show, Jeff. How's everything going?
Yeah, I'm pretty still sweaty. I'm home now. Haven't showered yet from practice. But in honor of our former colleague Paul Domowich, the towel that I carried throughout today's practice helped keep the sweat down. So ready to talk about some Eagles, about training camp. We're 2 days into what is now the 2023 training camp.
Yeah, the famous Damo towel. I gotta find one. I don't have a towel that size right now. I gotta get one of those before too long. Jeff, I really want to get into the whole, our takeaways from Eagles training camp. But first off, I want to thank all those who are watching and ask you guys to submit your questions at inquirer.com/live. We're going to get to some of those later in the show. If you have anything you want to know that what we're seeing at training camp, submit them there. But anyway, Jeff, I want to get right into it. Let's start with the injury report. This is, what training camp is this for you? What number is this?
This is the number 15.
Okay, so this is 5 for me. And at least for me, this is the lightest injury report I've seen for an Eagles team going into training camp. I don't know. You have more experience, so maybe you've seen a lighter one. But I guess let's dive into that.
Yeah, no. I got to agree with you. For me, this is probably the healthiest I've ever seen the Eagles coming in the training camp. We live in a different world now, though, in terms of the NFL and how much teams practice, how hard they practice. So you don't have as many injuries because of that, partly because of that. Now, on the flip side of that, I think some of the old school coaches like Andy Reid would be like, I'm okay with a few injuries because I can figure out who can play and who can't play. But what we have here essentially is the healthiest team the Eagles have ever had heading into training camp. That very much was the case in the spring. They only had 6 practices anyway, but there's only one guy right now who isn't practicing, and that's Haason Reddick. And he has a groin soreness is what the Eagles are terming it. And he has yet to practice. They say he will be back after the weekend. I'm not sure when that is. That's kind of a nebulous timetable for when he returns. And then other than Haason Reddick, of the guys on the 90-man roster, only Avonte Maddox, who has a toe injury, and Derek Barnett, who's coming off an ACL injury. Those guys are limited, and that's it. Everybody else is practicing.
Yeah, you mentioned the light spring workload, and I think that this plays into it. Yesterday, there were some big names during training camp from other teams who sustained injuries, Joe Burrow and Jalen Ramsey. Meanwhile, the Eagles were holding a walkthrough. And I think that this does play into it. I think that a lot of it is luck. And I think that eventually, this injury luck won't always be there for the Eagles. But there is something to be said about this light workload. The Eagles don't have back-to-back practices very often between now and the start of the preseason. There's a lot of walkthroughs incorporated. There's a lot of off days incorporated. Like you mentioned, the spring workload for them was a lot lighter than a lot of teams. So, when they finish the season relatively healthy and then they had a pretty light offseason workload, I guess it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. But yeah, this is like the first time that I can remember, not the Eagles not having any significant starters who are kind of coming off of rehabs that are kind of lingering, limited in certain ways. It's definitely, the way that I think every team would like to start training camp.
Yeah, as I noted in my practice notes, 5 years ago, the Eagles coming off the Super Bowl, they were decimated because they had so many guys that got hurt during the year that needed surgery, or guys who played through injuries up until the end of the season, which of course went further than normal. And they had to hold off on surgeries. So that by the time they came back for training camp, you had like 5 or 6 regular starters who couldn't practice. And right up until the start of the season weren't ready, or maybe they needed a few weeks after that. Remember Fletcher Cox had a foot thing. Brandon Graham was coming off surgery, and the main guy, Carson Wentz, had the knee thing, and there was a big question about whether he'd be ready or not, and he was kind of resistant to their timetable, and that created all this drama around that team coming off a Super Bowl victory. Now, the Eagles, of course, didn't win the Super Bowl this time around, but they are much healthier, partly because of how healthy they were last season, and partly because of the changes in the practice schedule. I agree with you. A lot of it's going to be luck. Who knows what's going to happen over these next few weeks? There could be certainly a number of players who just get various broken bones or torn ligaments or ruptured Achilles, etc. But in terms of soft tissue injuries, the Eagles have seemed to figure out a formula to keep those down. And primarily, it's like not overworking them. Why spend these guys, especially your key guys, in training camp? Those guys are pros. They're going to be ready anyway. They're going to do all the necessary work that they need to do. Why push them? And you've seen that when the Eagles have had those types of injuries with starters, they've just kept them out of the preseason and waited until the season started.
Yeah, and last year there were a lot of concerns about the practice schedule. How heavy it was and how they weren't practicing as much. I think that was a hot topic, but they kind of proved that even with the light practice schedule, they can get out to a good start and win a lot of games. Really quick, Jeff, one of the guys who is on the injury report, Derek Barnett. He's limited. He's coming back from the torn ACL. I think you had some reporting on him earlier, so I wanted to give you a chance to hit on it in the show.
Just to confirm the report about his contract restructuring, really a pay cut. He had a deal that was worth up to $8.5 million for this year. It's now down to $6 million, but still only $1.5 million of that is guaranteed. So he still gets that number. He's always going to get that number. That's what the Eagles originally signed him to. He's got like per game bonuses that trigger when he's on the active roster. I don't think this guarantees that Derek Barnett's going to be in the 53-man roster when the season starts. I mean, that contract, that is guaranteed. Obviously, a lot of us questioned that deal when Howie Roseman gave to him last offseason. It was one of the few bad deals I think he did. Wasn't Howie's fault or Derek Barnett's fault that he suffered an ACL in the first game of the season, but this was a guy that was often hurt, and a guy, even when he was healthy, never really kind of lived up to that first-round billing. And seeing him out there, it's just kind of, he feels like a guy that he's from a bygone era of the Eagles. Like we've kind of moved on from those types of guys. So he's here. Who knows what he can do? He's getting some reps because Hassan Reddick is not playing, not in team reps because he's not participating in that, but he's certainly in some of the other stuff in the individual drills. So we'll see how it plays out. Obviously the talent's there. The motor is there, but this is a guy that's, again, coming off a pretty serious injury.
Yeah, and sometimes that motor can get him in trouble. Let's segue to Eagles news here. There's a lot of things that we've obviously been able to witness the last couple of practices. I want to get one of your big takeaways, but I'm going to start. I'll take the first one. Nick Sirianni, I think, has kind of been in creating some buzz with some of his disposition, I guess, at the beginning of camp. Kind of getting into guys, I guess. What's your recounting of it, and what's your take on it?
Yeah, I missed the blow up he had with the skill position offensive players today. But then I saw the video that another reporter, I think it was Brandon Lee Gouton, had recorded and put out there on social media. And on a scale of one, Andy Reid being pretty mellow, and Jim Washburn, for those of you who remember Jim, and number 10. In terms of colorful language and how angry he was, it's kind of like a 5, I guess. And I've seen Nick get more upset and more vocal before. And honestly, he has a reputation of being a yeller. I did a story about it a couple of years ago. A real quick anecdote about that. For those of you who haven't read the story, Nick told me at one time it was Chargers training camp, and he was obviously assistant at that time, and his father was in the family and friends tent. And someone else came up to him and was like, "Oh, who's your relative that's on the team?" And he points to his son, Nick Sirianni, with the visor on. And the guy's like, "Oh, the guy with the visor on who's yelling at everybody?" And so that's Nick. He's not going to hold back. And typically, what we saw early on when he became the head coach was he'd focus really on the receivers because that's his background. But at Monday's practice was the entire team because we saw a lot of pre-snap penalties and from both sides of the ball. And at one point, he, of course, we're not supposed to quote the coaches. And if I did so, we'd have to start hitting the beep button because Nick dropped his share of F-bombs. But at one point, it just really surprised me. He's like, defense, get your stuff together, get your blah, blah, blah together. And he's like, Sean. And, that was direct reference to the new defensive coordinator, Sean Desai. So he wasn't afraid to call out one of his chief defensive lieutenant right there in front of everybody. But this is also a little different today. It was that he did it during the period where you can shoot video. There was a little discussion in the media room about whether this was performance art and, and I don't know, give me your take on that. Cause I thought, honestly, I rewatched it again. I'm like, I didn't think so. I think Nick, when he gets upset, he gets upset. I mean, maybe he wants to, I think he's delivering a message, like, okay, hey, we got to the Super Bowl, but we cannot rest on our laurels. Let's, we have to do this, that, and the other thing. And we got to be detailed about what we do.
Yeah, that's my read on it. I think this is kind of reinforcing a message that he wants out there. I do think that he's probably in the moment just kind of flying off the handle, but I do think that there is a little bit of intentionality to it. Even yesterday, like you mentioned, he was getting on these guys, like he's literally shouting into a megaphone. It's like maybe a little bit of that is he knows that we're not supposed to quote him on these things, so he can be a little bit more free with what he says. But I do think that a little bit of this is he wants everybody to know that he's not going to, this is his message is, they have to reset from last year and they got to be detail oriented, all the stuff he always talks about, all those, cliches that he has about 1% better and all this stuff. I think that he does kind of want to get that message across. I definitely don't think it's by accident that, he gets into the team in front of all the fans and, during the shooting period. I think that there might be a little bit something there about just kind of wanting that message to get across.
Yeah, but I think it's also him. I mean, that's who Nick is. And maybe he's a little more comfortable now at this point, 3 years in, that he can do that. He can even yell at, I remember just right there in front of him was Devontae Smith. He can yell at stars as a group, not him specifically, but as a group. But I do recall 2018. I hate to reference, that season and talk about the old days, but that team had the same issue early in camp, and it seemed to carry over into the season. Just so many stupid mistakes and pre-snap penalties, and like Doug, who's a pretty mellow guy, he was just become increasingly unhinged over the course of that camp because of all those things. And like Doug, when he yells, he gets like really deep, and you can hear it in his, that it comes from deep inside of him how angry he was. And maybe it also was a little performative on his part because I don't think that's who he is. But like at some point, you got to be like, hey guys, like the Super Bowl is over. And for Nick, last season is over. We gotta, we buckle down here and stop making mistakes. But just to point out, I thought it was a cleaner practice. I think there was only one pre-snap penalty. There's more to it than just that. There were a couple mistakes. There was one play where Marcus Mariota, someone must have blown an assignment. They had like a 3rd and 8, simulated 3rd and 8.
That rollout
at the goal line, at the rollout, and there was like one guy over there, and there was like 5 defenders. I'm like, something's wrong there, right? Did you point out to me that one up? Didn't you point out to me that Mariota spiked the ball into the ground or something like that?
You like when he got out of bounds, he like spiked the ball out of frustration. You could tell that something must have gone awry on that.
Yeah, something wasn't right. So like, that's stuff, but that's what training camp is for. That's this is the time to make mistakes if you're going to make them.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any other a major takeaway you've had from the first 2 days? Anything stand out to you?
I think when you have these training camps, and especially early on, it's always about the new guys. I think generally there aren't many free agents that they've brought in. So a lot of attention right now is on the rookies, and justifiably so. I think Jalen Carter primarily not only because of where the Eagles drafted him, top 10, but because I think he's a guy that by the end of the year will be maybe in terms of reps, their snaps, their number 1 defensive tackle. It's possible. He's for sure. He's that talented because you have Fletcher Cox on the downslope of his career even further than it is.
Snaps. Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen with Jordan Davis. That's obviously a big topic too. We can talk about him at some point. Mm-hmm. But you want to see if Jalen Carter is the real deal. And again, these are practices in shorts and shells. Contact is limited. But having been around it a long time, I like to see, mostly when they get the pads on, obviously in preseason, et cetera. But these first few practices, you like to see whether this guy passes the eye test or not. And to me,
Yeah.
Carter did right from the get-go. He's explosive off the ball. As Jason Kelsey said yesterday, he hadn't faced him yet, but he had said that we felt his presence or his penetration on a play, even though it was on the backside. You felt that there was pressure there being delivered. And then I think today was Jordan Mailata who said he's quick.
Yeah.
So when veterans like that are talking about rookies, and obviously it's their teammates, but the way they're talking about him, it tells me that this kid, I'm not going to say yet he's going to be the real deal or he's going to start from day one, but he's going to be playing a lot of football this year.
Yeah, no, I wrote about Carter today, and he talked after practice today. And one of the things I wrote about is like it is pretty difficult for a defensive tackle to make an impact in his rookie season. The list of guys who have either won Rookie of the Year or made a Pro Bowl, or even the highest like honor being named All Pro. The list is literally it's Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh for the latter two. For Rookie of the Year, you had Sheldon Richardson, and that's it in like the last 15, 20 years. So, it's a really high bar to be able to make an impact at that position. But, Jalen Carter does kind of fit the mold as somebody who could because, of his draft pedigree, just the ability that he had in college. And like you said, the one thing that I wanted to look for before they get the pads on, in shorts and shells, you're right. Some guys, it favors them. Other guys, are at a little bit of a disadvantage without that physicality. But the one thing that you can pick up on, I think, is how quick somebody is off the ball. And that's one thing that you notice with him is that he gets off the ball well. And yeah, like you said, Jason Kelsey said, he made a drastic move and we felt it. I think that a rookie kind of having his presence felt on the first couple of days of camp, I think that does speak to, the potential that's there. I think with him, he has stretches in practice where, you really kind of don't really know he's out there. I mean, we're watching him obviously, but he has stretches where he doesn't do a whole lot. And then it almost seems like every once in a while he's like, all right, I got to turn it on and get, make a play. And it's kind of the sense that I got from, the people who are around him in college and high school. That's kind of how he is in practice. That's his demeanor, is that he's the type of guy that when he wants to make a play, he's going to make a play. So yeah, I would say that he definitely has popped a couple of times in the first 2 days, but like you said, it's still early.
It's so early. And just to really bring context to one of the plays you'll probably hear others, if you read others' practice notes or whatever it is, like he split a double team and he got into the backfield. And then I looked closer at my notes. I'm like, oh, that was a third team drill versus a third team offense. So I was like, all right. I mean, it's so early. I mean, I don't want to blow all this stuff up.
There's so much context with all this stuff too, who they were against, what the drill was, was it a situation where it's like third and long and the quarterback's supposed to hold the ball for a while? There's a lot that goes into this stuff.
And we don't have the luxury of replay and exactly know what the play is, but I mean, certainly you can see things. And when something does stand out in practice, if you've been around a long time, you tend to think that it has some meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. How about Nolan Smith? I mean, he's been definitely getting a lot of buzz on social media. I said this the other day. Like, I feel like the shorts and shells setting is the setting that he's supposed to look good in. Like an undersized, super athletic defensive end or edge rusher. I feel like that's where he was supposed to look good. But I know that you mentioned him in coverage a couple times today. I'm just curious, like, how have you seen him so far?
Yeah, I noticed this in the spring. This is the one thing I've noticed about him is that, he's undersized. You look at, checks notes, right? 6'2", 238, probably about the same size as Hassan Reddick. But he looks bigger than that out there. He's got some length. Maybe it's his legs. I don't know what it is. Maybe he's got a long set of legs. But he just looks long. Yeah. He's got pretty long arms. So I think that clearly that's a good thing for an edge rusher. And then, today he actually got a little pressure off the edge of one play. He's getting some reps with the first team because Hassan's out, and he's playing. That's going to be his side of the ball more often than not. And then he picked up a Boston Scott kind of like Texas route. I know it wasn't a Texas route. I think it was just a flat route. And then he went upfield, kind of like on a wheel, and Nolan ran with him the whole way. And so, I mean, like, this is something that he can do. He's really I think he's ideally suited in terms of he's behind one of the best outside linebackers in that scheme, and he can really learn from, and someone who's also similarly sized to him.
Yeah.
So he's in a good spot. I mean, there's probably going to be, again, like I said, if Derek Barnett makes the team, that could even be a buffer before you have to force Nolan Smith out there. But again, like the defensive tackle position, there aren't many rookie defensive ends that come in and make instant impacts. It's just really tough for defensive linemen to make hay that early. And there are an assortment of reasons for it. I think a lot of it just has to do with getting the NFL body and getting used to the sheer size and strength of the offensive linemen.
Yeah.
These guys are like freaks. You know, you look at Jordan Mailata, freak size, freak athleticism, and then all of a sudden you're tasked with having to try and get around this guy, or obviously Lane Johnson on the other side. And these guys struggle. They struggle with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think unless you're one of those like top guys, like, the Chase Youngs or the Myles Garretts of the world, you don't really see a lot of edge rushers really make an impact early on. I had Sidney Brown written down. I haven't seen a whole lot, from him the first 2 days. He's working mostly with the threes. I think that they're going to try and make him earn it a little bit. But no, I didn't have him written down in my notes very often. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I know we're probably going to talk a little bit about position battles later on, but I thought Sidney flashed a few times of the 2 open practices that we had in the spring, whatever that means. The buzz kind of from the team or, people inside the building is that this kid has a chance to maybe push for a starting spot. I think that's asking a lot of a rookie. Safety, there's a lot to know, especially in the scheme. Maybe that's the one position on defense that you can slide someone in and not worry as much about them because you're often in a 2 safety shell with how good the Eagles pass rush is and with how good and seasoned the 2 cornerbacks are with James Bradbury and Darius Slay. Maybe there isn't as much asked of him. I mean, that's why they kind of were okay putting CJ Gardner-Johnson in there without him having played really a lot of safety and with him not really knowing the scheme. They figured, okay, this kid's athletic enough. He can kind of just figure it out as he goes along, and we have a lot of guys to cover for him. But they don't really, I think, need to do that in this circumstance because, well, I don't think like Reed Blankenship is guaranteed anything, and Terrell Edmonds, who's been around a long time, isn't guaranteed anything either. These are guys who've done it, and so I think they're probably going to give those guys the first shot. I still wouldn't rule out maybe a move for a safety at some point. Justin Evans, I thought looked pretty good today. He's another guy kind of under the radar free agent that they were able to get very cheap because he's had a lot of injuries over his career. And then the other guy would be Kayvon Wallace, who actually was the first up. Was actually started the first series.
That surprised me.
Yeah, they're going to rotate. I guess they're going to rotate those guys in and out. Reed's been the one consistent, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Yeah,
saw Tremon Edmonds' parents at practice today taking pictures with Swoop. So that's that's my observation for you.
Oh wow!
So
you're ahead of me. I didn't see that at all.
Transitioning over to predictions, you mentioned the position battles. We have a couple that I kind of wanted to go through here. With the running back situation, it feels like there's kind of like a polarization among the beat reporters and just the people who are kind of even like fantasy football people have been talking a lot about this. Whether it's going to be DeAndre Swift or Kenny Gainwell or Rashad Penny, if Boston Scott's going to have the same role. I guess I know it's early and it really is going to be easier once the pads are on. But as far as the first 2 practices go, I mean, what are you thinking about the running back position?
I guess it's gonna be all of them, right? All of the above. But I think this can be the what you saw out of Doug Peterson, a little more by committee. I mean, they're always by committee. I mean, all 3 running backs played a lot last year, but Miles was certainly the de facto number 1. I think DeAndre Swift is going to end up getting probably the most reps because he can catch the ball out of the backfield better than Brad Penny. Brad may be a little more rundowns, obviously short yardage. He's got that power. We still don't know about him. He's coming off a broken leg and is often injured. Kenny, who made some progress last year, playoff Kenny, as he likes to call himself. when Miles had his issues late last year with his knee and production, he was able to perform very well. So it'll be interesting. I think it's going to be by committee. I think those top three guys, and you never rule out Boston Scott, especially when they're playing the New York Giants. So I think Swift is going to end up being the guy with the most snaps by the end of the season.
I'm going to zag here. I really think that Kenny Gainwell is kind of the lurking,
wow.
the one I think could end up, leading the team in snaps. I agree that it's going to be by committee. I think that Swift is kind of we've already noticed it. Like, he's been catching a lot of passes out of the backfield.
Yeah.
They definitely seem to be working that in. I kind of think that, like, they drafted Gainwell to be like that Nyheim Hines type running back. And I actually think that he's a player where, like, his stature and like what he did in college hasn't really fit what he's done in the pros. Like, I actually think that he does a good job between the tackles. He's got good vision and he's good in short yardage situations. He hasn't really flashed much as a receiving, threat. He hasn't really been the gadget guy that you kind of expected him to be. I could see DeAndre Swift being in that role, again, Nyheim Hines role where, he's lined up at the slot, or he's just kind of that receiving back. And then Gainwell can kind of be more of like the every down or, early down type of running back.
Okay.
Especially like, I know that Penny's got the power, but the Eagles haven't seemed to really care about having like that power running back as much. I think it's a lot. Jalen Hurts can kind of bring that dynamic to an offense, especially in the red zone. He can kind of get those tough yards. I know that, we could have a conversation about whether or not they should keep continuing to expect him to do that. But yeah, I think that Gainwell, they turned things over to him in the playoffs, like you said, playoff Kenny. He definitely had, a kind of a strong stretch there. And I could see him kind of being the guy, at least on early downs, who's going to lead the team in carries.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you ask the Eagles, or if you ask them to be truthful, they'll be like, okay, it's our offensive line. It's like, and then Jalen Hurts are the reasons why the run game is successful. Hey, just get a guy who knows how to hit the hole, and Kenny does that well. So I agree with you there. And Kenny, as you said, they thought he's going to be like a Nyheim Hines guy out of the backfield catching passes. Really, kind of hasn't really been that guy. He's disappointed a little bit as a receiver, and we know Swift. Swift is you can just see it out there, just the way he runs his routes. He is a good receiver. But I think, like, all told, because of that and because he can run, he'll be utilized a lot, and they'll be able to finally have a running back receiving game, which they really haven't had much of the last few years.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think Penny's the type of guy, like, I think that there will be a Penny game at some point. I feel like there'll be one game where he's got 120 yards. I think they're going to just try and keep him healthy by limiting his carries a little bit. As far as the right guard competition, obviously Cam Jurgens got the first crack at it. I was really curious to see today if he would get the second day too. When they had Andre Dillard and Jordan Mailata competing for that left tackle spot, they kind of alternated days, but it seems like Jurgens is getting the first extended look at it. I guess, do you think that he's going to just kind of keep this job throughout training camp, or do you think that the Steen's going to get worked in a little bit?
I think it's going to be his job, and not even to lose. I mean, I think it's just his job. Unless he really struggles. He's a smart guy. I think he'll be fine. They'll be able to cover him. That's the spot where you can cover a guy more than any other spot. And he's a second-round draft pick. They want to get him in there, get him playing time, and kind of get him ready for next year when he's probably going to be the starting center. I mean, I don't want to count out Tyler Steen, but he's also a guy that's transitioning from playing mostly tackle to guard. So it's not like you're expecting this guy to all of a sudden be ready, and he's a rookie. So maybe something changes, but my guess is that Jurgens will be the starting right guard.
That's a good point about Steen not really being a guard either. But to me, like, I agree with you. I think that this is Jurgens' job to lose. I think that, if he doesn't give them a reason to make a switch, they won't. But at the same time, I just feel like logically, it's like Steen is going to be a right guard for this team at some point. I think that, eventually he's going to have that job. I almost think it makes more sense to have him in that right guard spot and have Jurgens stay as the heir apparent at center, especially because, one injury to Kelsey, and now all of a sudden you're putting Steen at guard and putting Jurgens back over to center where he hasn't played. But I agree. I think that the team's high on him, and I think that they want him at that right guard spot. I think that's why I got the first crack at it. And yeah, if he doesn't give him a reason to switch, I don't think they will. So
yeah, it's a fair argument.
Yeah. And then lastly, the safeties and the linebackers, I guess. We hit on safeties a little bit. Who do you think's week one starters at safeties?
I guess I'm going to stick with Reed and Edmonds, but maybe throw in there like a name yet, a guy yet to be named. I know everyone's kind of fixated on Butter Baker, but didn't he sign some contract?
Yeah, he just signed a contract
Yeah.
restructure. I think he's staying put.
Yeah.
I agree with you, but I almost wonder sometimes, like, we've been seeing a lot of Zach McPherson in the slot because, Avante isn't playing in team sessions with the toe injury. I almost wonder, like, if you just put Avante back at safety and move Zach to the slot. I know it's like you're putting a worse player closer to the ball, but I do find that interesting, especially as we get to see Zach in the slot for the next couple practices.
I think Avante is so far removed from playing safety.
Yeah. Okay.
Like as a rookie, I just think they've kind of gotten away from that idea.
Yeah, fair. And then at linebacker, I mean, do you think that it's more likely they make a move there just because, they got Nicholas Morrow and Nakobe? I feel like if they're going to make a move, it's going to be at linebacker.
Yeah, I would say a little more linebacker. And plus you can make a move and waiver wire. I mean, I don't think they have to even trade for somebody. You could find somebody that's not going to cost you much. Morrow looks fine. I don't know. It's so early to really kind of be able to say. Christian Ellis is the guy that everyone's kind of been talking about, at least amongst the reporters, based upon those 2 interceptions. Yeah, I mean, I like the kid. He's a smart guy, and I always feel like sometimes those guys who are like pigeonholed as being special teamers don't get the opportunity to play defense when they certainly have it. And it seems like he's gone out there and made the best of his opportunities. But I think probably more than likely will be still Nakobe Dean and Nicholas Morrow day one.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that the fact that they don't have as much depth at that spot, like even if it's just adding depth, adding a third or a fourth linebacker, because they're just so thin at the top, and the group's undersized right now with Nakobe Dean and Morrow. So yeah, I definitely think that there's probably a move to be made there. It's been 32 minutes here, and we haven't talked about Jalen Hurts and how he's looked the first 2 days. I guess that really speaks to how far he's come as a quarterback. That it really isn't like the headline of camp anymore. It's like he kind of is who he is. I mean, I guess has he surprised you in any way, or what have you seen from him in the first 2 practices?
I mean, you make a good point because remember, like a year ago, that was like the only thing that anyone could talk about was Jalen Hurts, and remember he had a few kind of bad practices, or I wouldn't even say bad. He had a few kind of like interceptions in practices, or a couple bad decisions that he made, and everyone was up in arms about it. And even I think it was last spring, someone said that he couldn't, or even recently, didn't someone say he didn't? There was like questions about something, whatever it is. I just feel like it's just crazy how far one year we've come with Jalen. And if you want to ever put in context about like what you read about how someone's performing in camp early on, whether it be good or bad, just think back to Jalen Hurts and how everyone thought he was terrible at the beginning of camp, and he ends up going having an MVP caliber season. So take it for what it's worth when you read my practice notes and anybody's practice notes, but read them anyway, and don't be afraid to sign up for a subscription. He's doing what he has to do. He looks and talks maybe a little more comfortable in his skin. He's kind of like he's the guy now. He's the franchise quarterback. I mean, at one point, like kids were screaming his name, and I don't think he like waved to them during the middle of practice today or something like that. I don't know if Jalen would typically do something like that because he's so
that's
serious.
A good point. I feel like usually when the kids are screaming for his name, he's like, quote unquote,
he's like laser focused. Yeah, he's like laser focused. So like, I mean, like that's not even football, but it's just something I just noticed about him.
Yeah, he did waves today. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just so uncharacteristic for him. I know obviously he loves doing things and talking to kids and that kind of stuff, but like to be in practice and to do that was kind of interesting. No, he hasn't had really bad he had a really good throw today. He was moving to his right. He hit Quez Watkins in stride for the sideline. He may have been touched down technically, and the play might have been blown dead. But I mean, he can make the throws. He had one where he shouldn't have thrown it to Devontae on a deep route where Josh Jobe did a good job of fronting him, and I think it was a jump ball. But other than that, he had a bunch of good. He had a really good pass to AJ Brown. First play,
slot fade. Yeah.
Slot fade. Great route run by AJ, of course, and he was able to muscle off. I think it was Josiah Scott in the slot.
It was Josiah. Yeah.
Yeah, those two, it's like easy money watching them work together.
I mean, that's AJ Brown for you. It's just kind of automatic sometimes with those two for sure.
I think the big question. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say real quick. I think the big question for Jalen though is just like how much is he going to run this year? I mean, I think it's still going to be a part of the offense, the zone read, or the draw plays that really kind of came that really helped them in that Colts game and down the stretch in various games? Is that going to be a big part of the game? I mean, they were just running straight power in the Super Bowl with him. I mean, how much can you do that? Do you want to do that with Jalen? That's the big question, because you got to keep this guy healthy. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But we're not going to know about that until the start of the season.
For sure. Yeah. The last thing I was going to say is just kind of emptying out my notebook here. It's Josh Jobe had like a kind of an up and down day. He got beat by Greg Ward on, I think it was a post, but it might have been a double move in the 7-on-7 period. And then, like 5 minutes later, he breaks up the deep pass to Devontae Smith. So it's just, it's noteworthy just because it's like, there's a lot of cornerback depth on the team this year. I think that those spots are going to be really, really tough to grab for some of those young guys. And, it is good to see that he rebounded, toward the end of practice. Probably helps his case a little bit. But
yeah, I think that's part of the reason why they're moving McPherson to the slot. You have so many guys now. Obviously they drafted Keely Ringo. They have a couple undrafted guys that they like, and Josh Jobe with another undrafted guy from the year before who they like. So why not give Zach, or at least kind of make him more versatile, give him a little, diversify his role and be able to play both inside and out. They know he can play outside. But you're right about Josh Jobe. Not a great moment getting beat by Greg Ward on a deep route.
Still hanging around. Yeah. Anything else? Any other takeaways that you didn't get to that you want to?
I'm trying to think. Boy, we really covered a lot here.
Yeah.
Anything about? I always feel like the old guys. AJ. I wrote about AJ. We talked about him earlier, just right now. But like, I just kind of, that's the thing with camp. You like forget about the stars, or you forget about the guys that have been around a long time, and it's just like sometimes you forget how good they are. And AJ just looks like he's in peak condition coming into camp. I don't know. There's just the way he's moving and running. I mean, he did last year, but I mean, could he possibly have a better year than he did last year? Considering, I mean, just like the chemistry with Jalen's going to be better. He's going to understand the offense more. Obviously you have Devontae on the other side, so that's going to take away a lot of catches from him, as will Dallas Goedert. But I mean, he's the real deal. He is the real deal. When you watch him out there, it's just you don't want to lose sight of that. So sometimes it's nice to kind of just sit back and just watch him work. And he had those fluorescent pink cleats on today, so it was really easy for me to spot him out.
Really easy
I was up high on the bleachers, and he was on the other side of the field. I'm like, oh, there's AJ.
Yeah, I'm not usually one to like preach this type of stuff or buy into this stuff, but like he does seem like laser focused after the Super Bowl. Every time you talk to him, he seems like he's still mad about it. So again, I usually don't like put a lot of stock into like, oh, this guy seems extra motivated or whatever, but he does seem like he's definitely seems like it's sticking with him. So
he's no joke. AJ is I don't know, he's just one of those guys that he can have a playful personality, and I think what did he say yesterday? He turned off all his social media. And I think that he seemed to have rabbit ears in the past about stuff. So he'd go on. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's, geez, I wish I could get off social media myself, but part of my job.
You and me both. Yeah.
Don't tell our bosses. But I think that's good. Clear head. Just go out there and do your business.
Yeah. Instead, we're getting more social media with Threads. But anyway, it's time to wrap. I want to thank you guys. Thank everyone for tuning in to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central. Be sure to return. We'll be back for the preseason. We'll have a pregame show. Inquirer.com /Eagles Game Day on August 12th before the Ravens game. You can also watch this segment and then you follow along as we live post through the game for that game. We'll answer your questions and comments again there. So in closing, I'm EJ Smith. This has been Gameday Central with Jeff McLane. We appreciate you, Jeff. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.